I don't know, B. Like, that's not my ideal setting, but I do enjoy competing, trying to find a way to navigate it. What'd you think about the Vegas thing and kind of doing your job versus how it's always been done?
The setup this year was okay. I kind of agree. I don't know if you saw the James Franklin clip from yesterday
Yeah,
about
yeah.
how he said it didn't feel maybe as Big Ten-ish was basically the point
Oh,
of
this
it. The
him
signage
Franklin
wasn't
on the side
everywhere,
of
and
the side session, James Franklin, not the guy at the podium
yeah,
that said "Viva Las
yeah,
Vegas," right? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, on the side, it seemed like he wasn't as keen on it being in Vegas because he just felt like it was kind of lost, that it was happening there, and there wasn't as much attention like in the city or around the area that the Big Ten media days is going on, and so I could kind of understand his point there. I guess if I had one critique, this is real inside baseball stuff. The side sessions are interesting, usually where you get more sort of nuts and bolts stuff with some of the local guys. And the Nebraska one got hijacked a little bit, I felt like, for about 10 or 15 minutes by sort of all these other questions about like what Rhule thinks on rule changes and,
Yeah,
his thoughts
yeah.
on USC and stuff like that. So there's little things where I leave an event like that I am like, oh, that was kind of annoying to me, but no one else cares, and we'll have a month to dissect stuff around here, so it's going to be fine.
Let me ask you something. Of the middle of the pack contenders, 4 through 10, because I'm throwing whomever you think is the 10th, whatever, 4 through 10, right? 4 through 9 is the popular, but I think 10, considering however you feel about where Washington is compared to, like, let's say, Minnesota. Of those guys that we've heard from so far, the Indianas, the Illinois, the Nebraskas, who do you feel or get the vibe that, man, that's interesting? Let me go back and take a look at where I think they belong in the pecking order. I have two that I'll run by you depending on your answers.
Uh, I think I had Indiana 10 on my list, and I wonder if I'm selling them short,
Indiana
actually.
is one of the teams I was going to that I think I am captivated by. I agree with you there.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like anything that happened at the event necessarily, or Signetti. He's going to be himself, and he's got that. He's outward. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks and have confidence in where his program's going to go. So I'm already used to that. So it wasn't any selling up front, by them. I just think that's a team that I'm not going to just uh, go with that narrative that, oh, last year was a flash in the pan, they're necessarily going to disappear from the scene. Now, I don't
Mm-hmm.
expect them to duplicate what they did last year, but I think there's like a happy medium you can find with a team like Indiana where you're like, I'm going to lean in and give them my respect as that type of squad that maybe they can get 9 wins again or something like that. And not just dismiss, oh, they're going to go back to like the 6-7 win pile. And so that would be one team, and I had them like number 10 in my preseason. I've been kind of big on Washington all along. I don't actually know if they've been up front yet, being a dangerous kind of a dark horse team. I think I had them 9. So I don't know. Those are maybe two teams, and we cover them every day. But the thing that stuck out about Nebraska, there's a real quiet
Oh
confidence
yeah.
there that I actually think we've, in some ways, if it's possible, even though we do this daily, we've maybe undersold how much I think they believe in their locker room. Why not us? Maybe we have actually fewer question marks than most of these teams we're talking about.
Oh, fudge. You just lathered up my partner over here. So the second, and this is for both of you guys, because since I'm interviewing my host too, BC, I'm a little Natalie and Imbruglia here, torn over the second team being Illinois or Nebraska. And the thing you would think, man, DB, Nebraska, but I downplay it a little bit because I do know this team. Why shouldn't I think about them the same as I think about when Brett Bielema says, we're the only team in the country that's bringing back a 3-year quarterback, a 3-year OC, and a 3-year DC. Like, I feel good about our team. And I'm like, oh, shoot, Illinois, give them the benefit of the doubt. In Nebraska, it's like year 2 Holgerson, Riola. I know the roster's better than a year ago. Why don't I allow myself to think?
Not to mention, I mean, you left out.
Why not Nebraska?
Mike Eckler, you left out year 3 Rhule, which there's a track record of. Like, I don't know. I think it's pretty simple.
And one thing go ahead, Damon.
No, so BC, and this is what I'm really geeked about. I'm setting Holgerson to the side because I know he's always good. You know, the thing that I would love is if I was Coach Rhule, I would love being able to bounce philosophy and teaching off of Addison Williams, John Butler, Phil Snow, Terry Braden, Rob Dvorak, who I'm glad he mentioned on Tuesday because he's like my secret weapon guy. Like, that staff on paper is really good with what they bring to the table, right? Like, I should have a peace of mind in that.
I think it's his best staff since he's been here. And it's a combination of what you said mixed with like the Terry Braden, Phil Simpson types who Phil Simpson said it, so I'm not talking out of school here. Like, there's that something to prove mindset with some of those coaches who just got here. And so I think that vibes well with Rhule also having that group of those old dogs who've been around a while, who in some cases have been, if they're not a coordinator now, they've been it in the past, or they you know, in Holgerson's case, he's been in the head coach's chair. And so it's great when you can have someone like that you can bounce a real big picture idea off of, and he knows what it's like to have that heat on him. And so I think that's probably something that we sleep on a bit. But if there's one topic that I feel like I'd like to get to more of in the next week that we probably didn't in Las Vegas, it's the connection and confidence with the coordinators.
Yeah.
And just when you put all 3 of them on paper, there's reason for a lot of optimism there. Obviously, we talk about, I think Holgerson gets the most talk for good reason. Eckler's coming right behind him. But the thing, when I was standing around Deshaun Singleton and listening to him talk about John Butler and just how geeked up I think he is about the aggressive nature of that defense.
Yeah.
And then if you go back to the spring and you kind of really pay attention to Butler, even though we would say, oh, he's close to the vest, he's not saying that much. He was dropping some things were going all right on his side too. Like they were winning their share one-on-one matchups with the secondary. And I think he liked how it was going. He would always talk to Phil Snow in the spring and be like, how's this lining up right now with how it's been at other places, sort of on the calendar. And it was tracking well. And so I think probably a topic maybe that hasn't been hammered home enough that I'm really interested in is I believe there's going to be an added aggression on this defense this year. And I think you talk about a quiet confidence about a group that's maybe not been talked about as much, even in its own state. I think it's on that side of the ball.
You know, it was kind of funny how Rhule, at least in the Husker Sports Nightly interview, was almost dismissive about any sort of questions about the defense. He goes, I got Phil Snow and I got John Butler over there, and we're going to be good on defense. There's no way we're not going to be good on defense. Like, he was almost offended that the question was even asked about defense. And then that's where he validated me.
Who asked that? Was that me or KC?
I don't remember.
I think it was KC, maybe.
But then he validated.
It was KC because it was a good question.
But then he validates me in that answer, and he goes, when talking about the lines, and he goes, oh, they're going to be hell on wheels. That was the one where I was surprised at how confident he was on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the D-line. I mean, it does remind me a little bit of 2 years ago. We were in that state where we were like, I don't know about these guys. This was before Ty Robinson had really broke out. We weren't sure about Nash and some of those guys. There was a lot of questions going into that August. And, 3 or 4 weeks into that season, that was the least of the questions, and you saw that was going to be a group that stacked up good against the run. I think in this particular instance, they feel like they've got a lot of different body types and skill sets where
Yeah.
you can mix and match and do a lot of things, throw a lot of change ups at people. And so I just think the creativity and some of the things that they haven't been able to say out loud or wouldn't want to say out loud at this point are going to be really interesting when we get to Arrowhead on that side of the ball.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love this. I like these talks because sometimes I feel like I'm learning on the fly. I didn't know, BC, even though I'm watching the game plan and clearly I can ask, but I tried not to. I'm watching this bowl game preparation, and I said, you know what? Butler seems like a pressure guy. Like I was saying this in December.
Mm-hmm.
Like he likes multiple looks. I think he wants to bring pressure. They brought a ton of pressure against BC. But what I didn't know, B, was it because he was trying to make up for what was happening up front with who was and wasn't playing in the bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, because I know what I would like if that's us and we're
Mm-hmm.
talking as a staff, I'd say, oh, such and such and such and such is in the game. Maybe we need to bring A or B gap pressure just to help them out or hold point. And so you try to overcompensate. And I was trying to decide, is he making up for, or is this his philosophy? It seems like pressure and being multiple is the philosophy, regardless of who's in the game. And now it seems like they have multiple pieces up front with Lafotus and Goldmans and Judy's and Lenhart's and Winaris and Keona Davis's and Van Poppels, where they can just get in the lab, right?
Yeah. And I think then when you combine that with like second level guys who I think could be good blitzers that are just going to be natural at it. I mean, I think like guys like Shavers and Javen Wright, like I think can get a lot done. Obviously, yeah. I mean, Singleton, just the variety of ways they can use him now, and I know he expects like he's going to blitz on occasion. I don't know. I stood around Deshaun for about 20-25 minutes. And it just stood out to me how much like he like vibes with John Butler, and it goes back to last year. And like there's guys who have been around him through last season that they just believe in him. And there was a kind of a small quote from Rhule that stuck out too to me. He was actually answering a question about Dylan Rhule and how he's grown as a quarterback. And he actually threw in there, he's like, well, he's gone all spring going against John, and Butler's as competitive as anybody, Rhule said, and all the stuff he was throwing at Dylan. And we're talking about spring ball here. And then Dylan kind of smiled later at me when he was asked about that. So I just think that there's an aggressive nature to John Butler that I am excited to see how that is presented through his defense. I'm not saying it's just going to be, you throw caution of the wind, but I do think they're going to get after it and pin the ears back, and I think guys are pretty pumped up about it.
BC, as we're talking about kind of the aggressiveness and what it's going to look like on the defense side of the ball, two names that did not get mentioned yet that I think are going to play a huge part of that. I don't know how you sit there in the room if you're John Butler and see Vincent Shavers and Willis McGahee and not be like, I'm putting those guys in the quarterback's back pocket as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, probably. You just named, like, if you were to say, okay, like 5 or 6 guys, that's all you get. Who are 2 names you're most excited to see this fall? It would be the 2 Miami guys would be on my list, McGahee and Shavers. I just feel like that first half in the Pinstripe Bowl with Vincent, we saw just like how much chaos he can create and how confident he was for a guy sort of in like one of his first starting situations in that role. And it's like he'd been waiting for that. Like he felt like he belonged right off the bat. And then, I've said this all off season about McGahee. He had a pretty small sample size, really like 100-some snaps, but he got a lot out of them. I mean, you have to think of like he forced 2 fumbles. There were like 1 or 2, 3 almost plays that are right there. He was a havoc creator, and it was obvious from the jump. And I think he's grown. And Rhule set it up front when it was on BTN, and so all the fans saw it. One of the reasons you believe more in your team is not just because it's year 3 and guys understand your system. But he mentioned a guy goes from 240 to 270 as an example. Like guys just get that this guy over here gains 10, 15 pounds, and he's just going to be tougher to deal with for Big Ten offensive guys, and he's going to wreck shop more. And I think both those guys are probably examples of what he's talking about there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll give you guys, I'll get a little sausage being made behind the scenes. It's like I was sitting in the coach's clinic with Coach Butler, and he had a side session, and he's using Nebraska's cut-ups, and he's talking to defensive guys, and he says, and I quote, this kind of seems really obvious, but I'm going to say this anyway because sometimes we get so involved with scheme and what's going on and telling people how smart we forget we just need to play to our players' strengths. For example, if you have a guy that's a good natural pass rusher or a blitzer, you probably should blitz him a lot. So I look at it. No, and he said, he goes, let's take a guy like Shavers. Let's look at some of these cut-ups. He's as good a natural pass rusher as we have. So what should I do as a coordinator? I want to be smart. I probably want to put that guy on the move. And he's showing these different looks, and I was like, why do we forget about that? But I was reminded, in talking to Coach Rhule, Ravi was so fixated on him validating the D-line, he forgot the back half of what he said.
The defense backs.
He rolled off like 6 corners, and he said, when those guys can play man, we can get into the box and be aggressive, right? So, and he's playing to the strengths too. If you got guys that can cover, let them cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you got guys that can blitz,
right, let them blitz.
Let them blitz. And sometimes I just think we overthink it, but they're constantly reminding us, we're going to probably try to play to our strengths. Not going to overthink this thing.
Yep, that's a good point. I mean, Sierra Wright, if he's ready to take another step off of a very good season, a debut season at Nebraska at one corner spot, and then as you mentioned, like if you feel like you actually have like 6 guys who are right there in that.
Do you see how easily he rattled them off?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously Andrew Marshall's one of them, but I mean, Amari Sanders, Bly Hill, Jeremiah Charles, the guy we forget about.
It was so good to see him mention JJ because BC. I'm you know me. I there's some guys I gravitate towards just because of their stories. Jeremiah Charles is one of them.
Well, you know what? Something we got to be careful with sometimes is I do this. Jeremiah got a chance, remember, to start against UCLA last year, and it was a bad first series. They picked on him a little bit on third down a couple times, and it was a big drive. And so I think some people have trouble sometimes shaking like 3 to 5 plays, and they put that label on the guy. Obviously, that's a very, very small sample size, and he's got freak athleticism. And not only did Rhule bring him up, Deshaun Singleton did when he was asked like who's someone that people just sleep on and he mentioned Jeremiah's grown a lot. So he's a guy to just not forget about. I know that's a really tight race, and sometimes corner's a spot where it can be harder maybe to get on the field, I think, if you're the 3rd, 4th, 5th guy as opposed to some other spots. But the fact that you have those options in the stable, as you said, allows that you can feed off that everywhere else with your D-line and everything you do if you feel like we can cover guys man up and they're going to be fine.
Go ahead.
I just want just run something by you guys. So when you look at corners, and I'm not even counting nickels, right, where you go Sanders and Charles and Kahn and Marshall and Wright and right, and then you go to safeties, and you got Singleton and Hartzog and Buford and Branch and Little Buford and Benning and Guthrie and
Benning, yeah,
and Donovan Jones, and it's like Butler said something a couple of weeks into conditioning where he said, "Hey, fellas, if nothing else, nothing is given. This will be a very competitive fall camp." Right? So if you're saying those kinds of things out loud, you think the guys aren't privy to the fact that nothing is given and everything? We just heard Coach Rhule say the same thing. Like the sense of urgency will be great. So you want as many options as a coach as possible. Like how are they? It's just crazy how they've gotten there so fast.
Yeah, there's no question. If you go back the last few years, the secondary, I feel like has the best. It will have the best second line of guys it's had in a long time.
Yeah.
I really think that.
I agree.
That's a big difference. And so the only thing I wonder is how much you rotate back there. And, maybe I'm wrong on that. It feels like corner is a spot where you often settle in two guys more than other spots on the field, and maybe it's not quite as deep of a rotation there. But you can do a lot of stuff where you're playing 5-6 DBs out there, and guys have niche roles that they excel in. And Rhule said this in the spring. We want to get a lot of guys on the field. And I mean, I give Tony White credit for this when he was here. We had heard that for a long time prior to the staff, and we sort of got to the point where we didn't necessarily believe it. And then that first game against Minnesota 2 years ago, there were like 22 guys on defense who played like in the first quarter, it felt like. And so I'm just interested to see if we get that sort of thing, like even off the bat in Arrowhead or what that rotation looks like. But there's no question, guys, I think are going into Monday's practice knowing for the most part, nobody's name is written in pen here. You've got to go prove it because there's a guy right on your heels, and there's the clips from practice that's going to show that.
Were you guys surprised that he unsolicited brought up he's not my favorite. I have to be very careful.
Javen Wright?
Nope, a guy, but he coaches Javen Wright.
Oh, Dvorak.
That Coach Rhule spent some time talking about the prowess of Rob Dvorak?
No, because he is so valuable to the staff, and as he mentioned, Rob's the guy he's like a day oneer in a way. Like he's been there with them as a player, when he's at
what did he say? I think Dvorak said 8 out of 10 years, 8 out of his 10 years. Or
yeah,
9 out of his 11.
Like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the linebackers and some of the guys that were recruited in the last class, and I mean, he's an effective recruiter for his part. And I think he's just a guy he's a little understated when he's up front. So maybe that's part of the reason why he doesn't get talked about as much. And he's not a coordinator yet by title. But I do know that like everybody on that staff heavily respects him. And, he's one of those guys that knows Rhule about as well as anybody. And I think that's why it's important probably that the head coach wanted to bring him up, because it's just like, this is one of those guys in the trust tree, so to speak, that I can turn to. He knows how I work. I know how he works. And that's very valuable when you have that sort of experience together. You've been through every sort of thing.
BC, lost in kind of my giddiness to be validated on the defensive line. Coach Rhule also kind of dismissed what I thought any concerns would be on the offensive line as well at the same time. Just
how about my guy coming to surface that I talked about at right tackle that we forgot about?
Who, Connect?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Go Big Red.
How were you, I guess, was offensive line an area where you had any questions, and do you feel like those questions were answered?
I mean, the question, I guess, that remains for them to go prove now is I have loved how they built the unity in that room. I love how it looks on paper. And I think it's been a good group. And I think we've gotten past the point of like, why did they retain Donovan Rhule? We're sort of past that question. Now it's like, yeah, he's doing a good job. He stacked up that room nicely. And it's like, okay, can they truly be like where we're saying kind of without a doubt, that's a strength on this team, or that is like one of the top 2 strengths on this team, because I think that potential is there. And I go back to the phrase that Donovan Rhule used in the spring. I think there's a book with the title, but watering the bamboo. And basically the point of like, you do that, you do that daily, but you don't always see that thing sprout up until like, 3 or 4 years with a guy, or in this case, maybe even a position group, how it all comes together. And I think that phrase applies to this O-line going into this season. We've seen it kind of, as Rhule would say, incrementally get better, but now it's like, are they that group where it's like, oh, okay, everybody can see it now without a doubt. They are that group that you can lean on, and they're going to be the guys who guide you. And I think that potential is there. And obviously Tyler Kanak, if he wins that right tackle job, give a lot of credit to a guy who stayed as much a team player as anybody in that locker room. He's like one of the most popular guys when recruits or anybody visits or parents of recruits visit.
Yeah, he's usually one of the guys on the player panel.
Yep. He's put his heart into being a Husker and embracing it and coaching other guys. Like last year, he was hurt during the bowl game, and he took a lot of satisfaction in like the true freshmen that were there, guiding them along and showing them how it's done. And he was working more at guard last year. I think tackle's natural for him. He feels better out there with that space. And so I'm not surprised that he's been thriving. And in the spring, he was climbing, and you could tell, but I don't think some people believed it. But now it's clear that he could be the guy to beat there.
Yeah,
keep watering the bamboo.
I'm a big body language guy, and it was interesting. And you were there too at Fordham. You know, it's snowing and the field is just being plowed, and this dude comes out on the little rascal. No, it's the one where you just kind of put your knee on and you wheel that thing out. You're kind of
the scooter.
leg. And Kanak comes out early with Harburg and a couple of the other gun-ho. There's probably 6 or 7 of them. And I'm like, this guy's hurt. And he's one of the first guys out there with the nut job in Harburg who doesn't have a shirt on. He's like yelling, like ready to practice as the guys are removing snow. And for me, like those aren't things that are like skirt and pom-pom type stuff, right? Like, that's one of those things where it's 28 degrees. It's your first bowl practice. You're not sure how it's going to go. And the guys that are out there front line typically mean something. And when you get a guy that's out there that's hurt and he's out there and he's one of the first guys out there, like I took note of that. I tried to pit that against what a good spokesperson he is, the ambassador, because a lot of guys can carry that banner. But when you're willing to be uncomfortable and you're not part of something, that's something altogether different. That's where Kanak got my attention.
Yeah, and think about it this way, too. If he actually wins the job and is the starter against Cincinnati, I think it'll be validated to – not that the coaching staff needs this, but within the fan base, people are going to look and say, he won the job over Gatula, Prohaska's back now.
Corcoran.
Like, if that happens, I think because of those other guys being in the mix for it, people would have to kind of nod their head and say that he must have done something this offseason pretty good to beat out those guys, because I know Gunnar Gatula, who could have something to say this August about this all, by the way.
Yeah.
But I know that he's a guy that this staff thinks a lot of his potential. So the fact that Kanak has put himself in this position as we go into next Monday just speaks to how much he's gotten after it. And he was, as you say, he was getting ready for this even before his body was completely healthy to make this run at it. And he's got a chance now.
Yeah, I just feel really good. I ranked the best depth, in my opinion, on this football team by position. I go O-line 1. People chuckled, but I put tight end 2. And I'm not so sure when you think about –
so defensive backs have to be up there, don't they?
Yeah, they're 3. And you can take corners or safeties.
Yeah.
I love what BC said about the second group being about as good. Like, this is about as good a second group. And they may be a year away, right? Like, you fast forward to these guys next year in the secondary, and it's like, ooh. But BC, how about this, though? When you talk about the cheat code and Javen Wright and Bauer, I think is going to be fantastic. We know about Shavers. Depending on how you view McCullough as a second-level guy or not.
And Watson Trent.
And I'm going to get to him. And McGahee and Watson Trent. Those guys were going against that offensive line. I think that second level of the Trents, the Shavers, the Wrights, I think they're kind of slept on a little bit. And I'm not talking about drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm talking about guys that are being coached by a guy with a proven track record that we've seen be good before. So I don't think we have to like extrapolate on how good, but you would assume that they're going to be better, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously I have a lot of respect for what John Bullock did as a backer, and he's not easily replaceable, but I took note when John Butler said this spring at 2 of the linebacker spots, he dropped a line like we're 3 deep there.
Yeah.
And
we kind of we were like, what? Who's he talking? Who?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, and look at it this way, we're not having a conversation, not that some of these guys can't insert themselves into the picture. They just recruited a great linebacker class on paper, right?
Yep.
Like guys are, and we're not having that talk like we have in some off seasons about now, where there's a little bit of panic in the voice.
Yeah, you don't have to bring up Merritt and Christian Jones. Like, you don't have to bring those guys up.
Yep. Yeah. So I think that right there, just start there. Think about that we're not having that talk. And that tells you, like, okay, they've definitely have felt like, the Bauer thing too adds to it. Like he was one of the best stories of the spring.
And
I don't think that's just a spring story at all. I think he's another John Bullock story where it was just like you're not going to keep him off the field at some point. I'm not, whether he's a starter or not, I don't know, but he's gonna matter. So yeah, you name those guys. I think there's probably people over there who would argue that's one of the top 3 deepest groups. Actually, I don't know, but they'll have to go prove it in the games. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of been on the defensive bandwagon a little bit the last week or so, because I do feel like for fair reason, January through July was sort of a lot of talk about Holgerson and Rhule getting together and the receivers and all this. But just sitting over there by Deshaun the other day, like listening to him talk about that group and sort of his expectations, I think they're under the surface. They feel really good about what they can do. And I think they feel they more than held their own against the offense too so far in the practices they've had. And I think they've had some spirited goes at it.
Not to, make this all about me, but you can have Dawson Merritt and Christian Jones. Pierce Muberry is the best linebacker in that class.
Pierce is going to be really. Pierce is going to be really good.
Hey, did you?
I'll die on that hill.
You see what he's done with his body?
So he's up 20 pounds, is what they said.
And I'm just
that dude's a menace.
I love them all, especially CJ. But when I was at a practice one day, BC, and Pierce was hurt, and he's got a yellow jersey on, and I like him a lot, so I just went to go talk to him on the sidelines, and I was talking to him about, hey, did you see Levante David over there? And, that's a guy that blah, blah, blah. And we just were talking about his rehab and how it's going. And BC, I'm a feels guy. He was so intense, even with just his answers about rehab and rigor and how it can be lonely, but what his goals were. It was only about 10, 11-minute conversation, but I left thinking, yep, that's the guy that when this staff watched him on film and they talked about how violent he was, that is definitely dialed in emotionally too, because he's going through rehab. And so for me to get that vibe based on just his words, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's he's actually conquering the hard part, which is the loneliness. And being a spectator at a young age. Like, that's really, really hard.
Yeah. Make no mistake, Pierce Muberry at some point, I don't know this season or when it happens for him, but he's going to be involved. Like he's got the long levers. He's got a great body type, and he did kind of climb up the ratings a little bit.
He's just he's violent.
But I would say he comes with bad intentions.
He's just a violent son of a gun.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who probably, if he's in a different locale, has like a higher, more recruiting noise around him and all that stuff. That's just the honest truth, I think, on him. But Nebraska got a really good prospect with him. He should not be if you talk about Merritt, Christian Jones, Muberry, and like who you name off first in that list, I don't even know. That's just such a nice crew to have, to start with. But again, that's the beauty of, I think, where they're at that position group, is we're not in that mode where it's like, oh, this guy's got to give you this right off the bat. And I also think that's good for those players too, to not necessarily have that burden on their back right off the jump.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247 BC. Great stuff as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Good to see you, B.
Yeah, you too, Damon. Thanks for having me, guys.